It was a Thursday evening, the kind that feels no different from any other. The sun had already slipped below the horizon, and the sky outside was that deep, quiet shade of blue that comes right before full darkness. Ahmed had been on his feet since 6 in the morning, 12 hours on a construction site, carrying weight that was not just physical. He was tired in a way that went beyond his muscles. His back ached. His hands were rough and dry. But none of that mattered to him, because he was going home. He sat in the driver's seat of his old white car and let out a slow breath. He could already picture it, the warm light coming through the kitchen window, the smell of his wife Mariam's cooking, the sound of small feet running toward the front door the moment they heard his key in the lock. His 2 children, Zain and little Sara, always raced each other to be the first to hug him. That image alone was enough to make him smile despite how exhausted he was. He turned the key, and the engine started. The drive home was about 20 minutes. He had taken that same road hundreds of times. He knew every turn, every traffic light, every pothole that rattled the car just a little. The road was quiet at that hour, the kind of quiet that makes a person feel like they are alone in the world. He drove past the familiar bakery that always had its lights on, past the small mosque on the corner, past the petrol station where he sometimes stopped for a cold drink. Everything was calm. Everything felt completely normal. He was about 8 minutes from home when his phone lit up on the passenger seat. The screen glowed in the dark. He could see the notification from the corner of his eye. It was a message from his brother. He had been waiting to hear about a family matter they had discussed earlier that week. Something about their mother's health. His heart tugged slightly. He told himself he would check it at the next traffic light. But the next light was green when he reached it, and he did not stop. He reached over and picked up the phone. Just one glance, he told himself. Just a second. The message was long, longer than he expected. And without even realizing it, his eyes left the road. His brain, which should have been focused on the 2,000 kilograms of metal moving at 60 kilometers per hour, was now somewhere else entirely. He was reading words on a small screen. He was not driving anymore. Not really. It happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The car drifted. Not dramatically, not with any warning sound. It just drifted gently to the left, the way a leaf drifts on still water. Ahmed did not notice it. He was still reading. And then, from the opposite lane, came the blinding white glare of headlights. A truck, heavy and fast, appeared from around a slight curve in the road. The driver of the truck blasted the horn, a sharp, desperate sound that split the silence. And in that fraction of a second, Ahmed looked up. He looked up, and he understood. He understood everything in an instant. He yanked the wheel hard to the right, but there was not enough time and not enough space. The front left corner of his car struck the truck. The impact was enormous, a sound like the world breaking open, metal crushing metal, glass exploding outward in all directions. The car spun. Ahmed's body was thrown violently against his seatbelt. The airbag deployed, punching into his face with a force he had never felt before. And then everything stopped. Silence. A terrible, ringing silence. The car had come to rest at an angle across the road, its front end destroyed. Steam rose from what was left of the engine. One headlight was still on, pointing uselessly into the grass on the side of the road. The phone he had been holding, was now somewhere on the floor of the car. Ahmed could not see it. He could barely see anything. He tried to move and felt a pain so sharp it took his breath away. His left leg was trapped. His face was bleeding from the glass. He opened his mouth to call for help, and what came out was barely a whisper. The truck driver had already stopped and was running toward the car, shouting into his phone, calling for an ambulance. Other cars slowed down and pulled over. People got out. A woman ran to Ahmed's window and looked inside, and the expression on her face told him everything he needed to know. He did not look good. He reached out his hand toward the window, not toward her, but just reaching, the way a person reaches for something familiar when they are frightened. He whispered a name. He whispered Mariam. Meanwhile, 8 minutes away, Mariam was stirring the pot on the stove and watching the front door. Zain had already asked twice when Baba was coming home. Little Sara was sitting on the kitchen floor, playing with a toy car, pushing it back and forth across the tiles, and making small engine sounds with her mouth. The dinner was almost ready. There was rice and lamb stew, Ahmed's favorite. Mariam had even baked small date cookies in the afternoon, the kind Ahmed always said reminded him of his childhood. She smiled to herself, thinking about his face when he saw them. Her phone rang. She assumed it was Ahmed calling to say he was 5 minutes away. She wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and picked up. The voice on the other end was a stranger's voice, a man speaking carefully, asking if she was the wife of Ahmed. She said yes, and in that moment, without hearing another single word, her body understood what her mind refused to accept. Her legs went weak. She grabbed the edge of the counter. Zain looked up at her from across the room with wide eyes, sensing something he could not name. She arrived at the hospital, still wearing her kitchen apron. She had driven there so fast she barely remembered the journey. The doctor met her in the corridor, a calm, serious man with tired eyes, and he explained Ahmed's condition carefully. A fractured left leg in 2 places, 3 broken ribs, a deep laceration above his left eye, a concussion. He would need surgery. He would survive. When the doctor said those last 2 words, "He will survive," Mariam pressed her hand over her mouth and closed her eyes. She was not sure if she wanted to cry from relief or from grief. She felt both at the same time. Ahmed woke up the following morning with Mariam sitting beside his bed. She had not slept. Her eyes were red and swollen, but she had stopped crying hours ago. She was just sitting there, watching him breathe, the way parents watch over sick children, with a quiet, desperate love. When he opened his eyes and saw her, he did not speak right away. He just looked at her, and she looked at him, and the silence between them held more words than either of them could have spoken aloud. "I am sorry," he finally said. His voice was hoarse and small. She shook her head slowly, and her chin trembled. She reached out and took his hand. Carefully, gently, the way you hold something broken that you are afraid will shatter further. She did not say anything, because she did not need to. But there were things she was feeling that she never told him that day. She had imagined, in those dark hours at the hospital, raising Zain and Sara alone. She had imagined explaining to her daughter, years later, why her father was gone. She had imagined a life with a hole in it that nothing would ever fill. The weeks that followed were harder than Ahmed had expected. He came home after 8 days in the hospital, his leg in a cast, his ribs still healing, his face marked with a scar above his eye that the doctors said would likely remain. He could not work. He could not drive. He could not carry his children, could not run after Sara in the garden, could not do the 100 small things that had made him feel like a father and a husband and a man. He sat in the house every day and looked at the walls, and the guilt inside him was heavier than any physical pain. Zain would sometimes come and sit beside him quietly, the way children sit with someone who is hurting when they do not know how to help but do not want to leave either. One afternoon, the boy looked up at his father with eyes far too serious for a 7-year-old and asked, "Baba, why did the accident happen?" Ahmed looked at his son for a long moment. He could have said many things. He could have talked about the truck, about the road, about bad luck. But he chose to tell the truth because his son deserved nothing less. "I was looking at my phone while I was driving," Ahmed said. "I took my eyes off the road, and that is why it happened." Zain stared at him. "Because of a message?" he asked. Ahmed nodded. "Because of a message." Zain did not say anything else. He simply turned back to the book he had been reading, but his small face was tight and thoughtful. Ahmed watched him and felt the weight of that moment settle deep into his chest. His son was 7 years old and had just learned, in the simplest and most painful way, that one careless choice can change everything. Mariam never blamed him out loud. She was not that kind of woman. But in the quiet of the house, in the spaces between conversations, Ahmed could feel the fear that still lived in her. She flinched slightly every time he drove, even months later after he had recovered. She would grip the handle inside the car door, and when they reached their destination, she would let out a slow breath as if she had been holding it the entire time. That fear was his doing. He had put it inside her on the night he picked up his phone, and no amount of healing could fully take it away. The driver of the truck also carried something from that night. He had not been at fault. The investigation confirmed that clearly, but the image of Ahmed's car spinning across the road in front of him never left him. He was a father too, a man in his 40s with a wife and 3 daughters at home. He took several weeks off work afterward, too shaken to sit behind a wheel. He eventually went back because he needed the income, but he was never quite the same on the road. One person's moment of carelessness had reached into the life of a complete stranger and left a mark. Ahmed returned to work after 3 months. His leg had healed, though it ached when the weather changed. The scar above his eye had faded to a thin silver line. From the outside, he looked like himself again. But inside, he was a different man. He drove now with both hands on the wheel, always. His phone sat in the glove compartment during every drive, not on the passenger seat, not in his pocket. He had put an automatic reply on his messages that said, "I am driving. I will respond when I stop." Small things, simple things, but they came from a place of deep and painful understanding. He told his story to anyone who would listen. He told it to his co-workers over lunch, to his brother who visited on weekends, to his neighbors when the subject of road safety came up. He was not ashamed to say what he had done. He had learned that shame keeps a lesson inside one person, but honesty carries it into the world. He wanted people to hear what a single distracted moment felt like from inside it. The helplessness, the impact, the waking up in a hospital bed and not knowing if your family would find you alive or gone. There is a particular kind of silence that lives in the space just before a crash. It is not peaceful. It is the silence of a moment that cannot be taken back, a second in which the world shifts, and a before becomes an after. Ahmed knew that silence now. He carried it with him. And because he carried it, he was careful. He was present. He was there, actually fully there, every time he sat behind a wheel, because he understood now with his whole body and soul what it meant to almost not be. Every single day, people get into their cars. They are tired or distracted or running late. Their phones buzz with messages, notifications, calls. And they think, the way all of us think, that they are the exception, that they are skilled enough, that the road is clear enough, that it will only take a second. Ahmed thought the same thing. He had driven that road 100 times. He had never had an accident in his life. He thought he was different. He thought the rules about distracted driving were for other people, less careful people, people who did not know how to handle themselves. He was wrong. The people waiting at home are always worth more than any message. They are worth more than any notification, any update, any piece of information that could possibly appear on a phone screen. Mariam and Zain and little Sara, they were sitting in a warm kitchen with dinner on the stove, and they came within inches of spending the rest of their lives without their father, their husband, the person around whom their whole world turned. No message is worth that. No call is worth that. Nothing that has ever been typed into a phone is worth a human life. If you are driving, drive. Let the phone sit. Let it ring. Let the messages wait. The people on the other end of those messages can wait, but the people waiting for you at home cannot wait for you if you are gone. The road demands everything from you. Your eyes, your hands, your attention, your full and undivided presence. Give it that. Give it everything. Because somewhere right now, there is a child listening for the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. There is a wife watching the door. There is someone whose whole evening depends on you arriving safely. Do not make them wait forever. Put the phone down. Come home.